Imagine a city of 2 million people just slowly losing its light. Not for an hour or even for a day. We're talking about a slow, creeping darkness. Because right now, that's the reality facing Havana and really all of Cuba. A whole nation standing on the edge of a total shutdown.
And listen, this isn't some future prediction. This is happening right now. A hellscape. That's the word The Guardian used. It's what you get when one of the world's great powers decides to turn the screws on an island nation, pushing it right to the absolute breaking point. You know, what we're watching unfold is this incredibly high-stakes geopolitical drama, and it's happening right in America's backyard. And at the very heart of it all, a single commodity that our entire modern world runs on: oil. And one administration is using it as a weapon, a tool to try and force what it hopes will be the final collapse of the Castro regime. This is the story of Cuba's oil crisis.
So how exactly is this all going down? Well, it starts with something we've seen before from the Trump administration, its signature foreign policy tool. You could call it the tariff hammer. The strategy? It's brutally simple. You threaten a key trading partner with massive economic pain to get them to do what you want. And right now, that hammer is hanging right over Mexico.
According to sources talking to Reuters, the Mexican government is in full-blown crisis mode. And why? Well, because President Trump has made it crystal clear. If Mexico keeps sending oil to Cuba, if it continues to be that energy lifeline, he will go after the USMCA, the massive trade deal that replaced NAFTA. We're talking trillions of dollars for the Mexican economy. It is a devastatingly effective threat.
And here's the strategy, laid out straight from the source. Trump's logic is pretty clear here. Cuba's old backer, Venezuela, well, that country has collapsed. Mexico is the last thing propping the island up. So if you threaten Mexico, you isolate Cuba completely. And that last part, a deal with the highest people is near, that tells you he thinks the Cuban leadership is just about ready to break. But this pressure campaign, it's not just about tariffs. The U.S. also has Cuba tagged as a state sponsor of terrorism. Now, you need to understand, this isn't just some political name-calling. It is a legal switch. It lets the administration pile on maximum economic pressure, cutting off access to international loans and aid, basically weaponizing the entire global financial system against one small island. Okay, so that's the political strategy. But what does all this mean for the 11 million people who actually live on the island? Well, the numbers, they paint a pretty terrifying picture of a nation that is literally on a countdown to zero. 180,000. That's the number you need to remember. 180,000 barrels of oil per day. That's what Cuba needs just to keep the lights on, to keep the buses running, to power the hospitals. It is the bare minimum for a society to even function.
And this chart, wow, it just lays the whole problem out plain as day. Of that 180,000 barrels they need every single day, Mexico is supplying over 100,000 of it. That is nearly 60% of the island's entire energy supply. So you see, Mexico isn't just another supplier, it is the lifeline. You take that away and the whole system starts to starve for energy, almost overnight.
And according to energy analysts at Kepler, this is what the timeline could look like. It's a 3-week countdown to a total catastrophe. Week 1, Mexican oil stops, nationwide rationing starts immediately. By week 2, fuel stocks are down to half, the entire transport system just stops. No buses, no trucks bringing food. And by week 3, a total power grid crash. A modern country literally thrown back into the dark ages. And just look at how fast this all happened. I mean, it's stunning. In January, whatever was left of Venezuelan aid just dries up. By early February, Trump is already talking about a full embargo. Then, February 3rd, Mexico's government is in those crisis mode meetings. This is not a slow-moving problem. This is a geopolitical flashpoint that has just ignited in a matter of weeks.
So you can imagine this puts Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, in a completely impossible position. She is walking a geopolitical tightrope, basically trapped between this historical solidarity she has with a leftist ally and the brutal economic reality that her country depends on the United States.
I mean, look at the choices. On the one hand, if she keeps the aid flowing, she's upholding decades of leftist solidarity, Mexico gets to project its own influence, and she can stand up to U.S. pressure. But on the other hand, if she halts the aid, she avoids those crippling tariffs, she shows her voters that she's a pragmatist, and she aligns Mexico with U.S. policy. It's really a choice between her political ideology and her country's economic survival. Now, publicly, Cuba is defiant.
Their foreign ministry is calling the U.S. actions blackmail. They're demanding respectful dialogue, not coercion. That's the official line. They're defending their national sovereignty against what they see as just pure foreign aggression. But then you contrast that with the American position, stated right here by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He says the goal is a managed transition. Now, in the world of diplomacy, that phrase is widely seen as code. It's code for a change in government, whether it happens peacefully or not. The U.S. isn't just trying to change Cuban policy here, it's aiming to change the regime itself.
But okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Because despite all the public hostility, there are frantic talks going on behind the scenes. Cuba's own deputy foreign minister has confirmed communications with the Trump administration. You have whispers coming out of the White House about talks at the highest levels. So, while they're trading blows in public, they are absolutely talking in private. The big question is, what are they talking about?
And all of this, it brings us to the end game. With all these different forces pulling in different directions, the American pressure, Mexico's terrible dilemma, Cuba's sheer desperation. What happens next? Well, analysts are really seeing three main ways this could all play out. So based on everything we know, all the intelligence, the most likely outcome seems to be some kind of a secret deal. Experts are putting that at about a 50% probability. A full-on collapse of the state is seen as dangerously close, though, at 40%, and a long, drawn-out stalemate, well, that's the least likely, but it's still on the table at 10%.
So what do these things actually look like on the ground? Well, collapse is the doomsday scenario. Mexico cuts the oil, protests and riots erupt, and the Cuban state itself just fractures. The deal scenario is that secret compromise. Havana agrees to release political prisoners or stop migrant flows, and in exchange, it gets just enough oil to keep the lights from going out completely. And stalemate? That's a slow, painful bleed, where Cuba just hangs on by a thread, getting weaker and weaker under this relentless pressure.
And you know, this brings us to the fundamental question at the absolute heart of this whole crisis. If you look at it from one angle, this is the deliberate strangulation of a nation. It's risking a massive humanitarian catastrophe just to achieve a political goal. But from another angle, it's seen as long overdue justice, the final necessary push to end a dictatorship that's been in place for more than 6 decades.
At the end of the day, the clock is ticking faster than it ever has before. The fuel reserves are dwindling, the diplomatic pressure is at a fever pitch, and so the most explosive question is also the most immediate one. Could this pressure campaign actually work so quickly that the Cuban regime, a fixture of global politics since the 1950s, is actually gone by this summer?